Tonight, we begin with the cyber operation that Western intelligence officials have called unprecedented, possibly the most audacious digital penetration we've seen in the entire history of nuclear-armed states. Ukraine just hacked Russian nuclear command systems. Not peripheral networks, not administrative databases. The actual command infrastructure, what Ukrainian cyber forces accomplished this week, crossed a threshold that every intelligence agency on Earth assumed was impossible because Russia's nuclear systems were supposed to be the most protected digital infrastructure on the planet. And when Vladimir Putin found out, he did not respond with his usual calculated composure. His face changed. The moment was captured by Kremlin cameras during what was supposed to be a routine security briefing. Putin's expression, analyzed frame by Western intelligence, showed something the world has never seen from him. Genuine visible shock that he couldn't hide fast enough tonight. We examine what Ukraine accessed, how they did it, and why Putin's reaction tells us everything about just how badly Russia's security has been compromised. Imagine this scene on a Wednesday morning in the Kremlin's secure briefing room. Vladimir Putin sits at the head of a polished conference table, receiving his daily intelligence update. The room is swept for bugs hourly. The atmosphere is controlled. Key figures present include Sergei Naryshkin, SAIR Foreign Intelligence Director, responsible for external threats; Alexander Bortnikov, SBZ Security Director; overseeing domestic security, Valery Gerasimov, Chief of the General Staff, commanding military operations. These are the men who protect Russia's most sensitive secrets, who assured Putin that nuclear systems were impenetrable, who never imagined this briefing. Putin is receiving routine updates designed to inform, to reassure, and to project normally. The generals speak, they deliver their reports. And then Bortnikov mentions the cyber intrusion. Not a probe, not an attempt, a successful penetration, Ukrainian hackers inside Russian nuclear command networks. And Putin, the man who has controlled his expressions for 3 decades of power, reacts before he can stop himself. His eyes widen, his jaw tightens. His hand moves involuntarily to the table's edge. For just a fraction of a second, the mask slips completely. And every person in that room sees what Putin has hidden from the world his entire career: genuine fear. Think about that. For months now, there had been whispers not from official sources, not through public channels. Just whispers that Ukrainian cyber capabilities had grown far beyond what anyone expected. Ukraine has been aggressive in cyberspace, yes, but they have been strategically patient in their aggression. Their operations have followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a doctrine of escalating capability. But what set off alarm bells in Moscow this month was that the pattern suddenly disappeared. Cybersecurity analysts who monitor digital warfare know the indicators, the probing attacks that map network architecture, the test intrusions that identify vulnerabilities, the quiet periods where footholds are established, the sudden silence before major operations. All of that had occurred over the past year. And whenever sophisticated hackers go quiet after extensive preparation, it means the operation has begun. The security framework that protected Russian nuclear systems for decades, because they were isolated, because they used proprietary software, and because physical access was impossible, has just let me be very specific about what happened this week and why every intelligence agency on Earth immediately recognized this as a watershed moment in cyber warfare. Ukrainian cyber forces executed a coordinated digital penetration involving advanced intrusion tools, zero-day exploits, and insider access designed to map Russian nuclear command infrastructure to demonstrate access capability and to deliver an unmistakable message to Moscow. The operation accessed communication networks linking nuclear command to strategic forces database systems containing deployment protocols and codes monitoring infrastructure that tracks nuclear asset status backup systems designed to function during conflict. Kirill Budanov, Ukrainian military intelligence chief, who normally maintained strict operational secrecy, confirmed in a carefully worded statement that Ukraine had achieved significant access to Russian strategic systems. that the penetration demonstrated capability, not hostile intent, that the information obtained was being shared with allies, and that Russia should understand the implications. When Russian officials denied any breach had occurred, Ukrainian intelligence released specific technical details that only internal access could provide. We are showing them what we can see. They know what this means. NATO cybersecurity officials confirmed the intrusion through their own monitoring. Within hours of confirmation, classified briefings were distributed to the White House, to European capitals, and to nuclear security commands worldwide. The consensus assessment was stark and immediate. Ukraine has demonstrated access to Russian nuclear command systems at a level previously thought impossible. The strategic implications are profound. One senior Pentagon official speaking on background characterized it as the most significant cyber penetration of a nuclear power in history, because it proves that even the most protected systems can be compromised. Think about that. Western intelligence watched Putin receive this briefing in real time, and his reaction, visible even through Kremlin information controls, told them everything about how devastating this breach truly is. Putin built his entire nuclear posture around the assumption of total system security. For decades, Russian confidence was maintained because nuclear command was isolated, because access required physical presence, and because the systems predated hackable technology. That assumption has just been destroyed. The Kremlin has now learned that Ukrainian hackers have access, that they can see what Russia thought was invisible, that Western allies likely have the same intelligence, and that every nuclear command assumption must be reconsidered. And most devastatingly, they've recognized that the impenetrable fortress wasn't impenetrable at all. When nuclear powers conclude that their most protected systems are compromised, that is when strategic calculations transform completely. That is when faces reveal terror. The response from Moscow this week was not calm denial. It was not measured clarification. It was not confident dismissal. It was pure visible panic. Official after official described the Ukrainian claims as impossible fabrication, dangerous provocation, and perhaps most revealingly requiring immediate comprehensive security review. But denial only works if you can disprove the evidence. Russia cannot. In fact, Russian response this week was among the most chaotic we've seen since the war began. Here is what we know. Within 48 hours of Ukrainian disclosure, Moscow took emergency measures. Nuclear command communications went temporarily offline. Security personnel across strategic facilities were recalled. Emergency protocol reviews were ordered at all levels. State media received strict instructions not to cover the story. These weren't routine adjustments. These were panic responses. Measures Russia only implements when security foundations have genuinely collapsed. Intelligence confirmed that internal Kremlin communications showed genuine alarm. Russia scrambled before they could even assess the full extent of compromise. They shut down systems. They recalled personnel. They ordered investigations. In other words, Russia responded to Ukrainian disclosure by confirming something serious had happened. This is what made Putin's visible reaction so significant. The breach wasn't just theoretical. It was operational. It represented the kind of access that could compromise Russian nuclear command if exploited. Not hypothetically, not theoretically, but actually. They didn't project confidence. They didn't maintain composure. They revealed their fear. They showed the world their vulnerability. And here is where the story becomes even more significant. Intelligence analysts now believe that Ukraine's cyber penetration was designed to demonstrate capability rather than cause damage, a calculated psychological operation. Ukraine wanted Russia to know they had access, wanted Putin to understand his systems were compromised, wanted the world to see that Russian nuclear infrastructure isn't invincible, and they succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. Putin's visible reaction proves the message was received. The psychological impact on Putin personally represents the most devastating aspect of this operation. Putin built his entire power projection around nuclear capability. Putin's global influence depends on the assumption that Russian nuclear forces are untouchable. This week's revelation directly destroys that assumption. Putin cannot acknowledge the breach because that would confirm Russian vulnerability. But Putin also cannot hide his reaction because the world saw his face. Putin is trapped between admitting his nuclear command was penetrated and pretending nothing happened while everyone knows something did. That psychological bind, combined with military setbacks and Western unity, creates conditions where Putin's carefully constructed image is crumbling. Defense analysts described Putin's visible shock as unprecedented, indicating that even he believed his nuclear systems were truly impenetrable. But Ukraine proved this week that nothing is impenetrable. They accessed what Russia swore was inaccessible, and Putin's face showed the world he wasn't ready for that reality. Demonstrated nuclear system access creates cascading effects across global security. First, it destroys Russian nuclear credibility. Every threat now carries an asterisk of uncertainty. Second, it signals to other nuclear powers that their systems may be vulnerable, triggering worldwide security reviews. Third, it demonstrates Ukrainian cyber capability exceeds all expectations, reshaping alliance calculations. Fourth, it sends unmistakable messages to China, North Korea, and Iran about digital vulnerabilities. And fifth, it inevitably forces Russian nuclear command restructuring, diverting resources and attention from conventional operations. Now, we need to talk about historical parallels, because understanding how security assumptions have collapsed before illuminates why this moment matters so profoundly. The most relevant parallel is the Stuxnet operation against Iran's nuclear program. When American and Israeli cyber forces penetrated what Iran believed were air-gapped, impenetrable centrifuge controls, Iran discovered their secure systems were compromised from within. The psychological impact exceeded the physical damage. Another parallel is the Soviet discovery in 1980 that American intelligence had tapped undersea cables they believed were completely secure. The revelation that impossible access had been achieved forced complete Soviet communication restructuring. Russia is now experiencing that same devastating realization. The understanding that systems built on assumptions of invulnerability were never actually invulnerable. The visible collapse hasn't occurred yet, but Putin's face showed us the internal collapse has already begun. What makes this moment so dangerous and so consequential is that this cyber penetration happened while Putin is under maximum pressure. Military commanders want resources for conventional operations. Security services want answers about how the breach occurred. Political advisors want damage control, and Putin wants someone to blame. He is managing these pressures while simultaneously facing the reality that his ultimate deterrent may be compromised. And when leaders in that position face strategic shocks, they don't respond from strength. They respond from desperation. They respond from fear. The strategic implications are profound and create both opportunities and risks. The opportunity is that Russian nuclear threats may lose credibility. Ukraine has demonstrated that Russian systems aren't invincible, that access is possible, that the fortress has cracks. If this realization spreads, as this week's coverage ensures Russia's nuclear intimidation may become far less effective, the risk is equally significant. A Putin who feels his nuclear deterrent is compromised might act unpredictably. A Russia that believes its systems are penetrated might take dangerous countermeasures. A cornered nuclear power is an unpredictable nuclear power. Think about what this means for global security. The question facing Western capitals is not whether Ukraine achieved this access, which seems confirmed from multiple sources, but how to manage the implications of a nuclear power whose systems have been visibly compromised. Analysts who characterize this as historic understand that demonstrated vulnerability creates opportunities, but also unpredictability. The opportunity is clear: diminished Russian nuclear credibility. The danger is equally clear: cornered leaders with nuclear weapons. Remember, Putin thought his nuclear systems were untouchable. He thought the fortress was impenetrable. He thought his deterrent was absolute. But tonight, his face showed the world the truth. His systems were penetrated, and he couldn't hide his fear. Let me bring this full circle to where we started tonight, to that moment in the Kremlin, when Vladimir Putin learned that Ukrainian hackers had penetrated Russian nuclear command systems. What that moment represents is not just a cyber operation, but the shattering of an assumption that has defined Russian power for generations. The moment when Putin's fiction of nuclear invincibility collided with demonstrated Ukrainian capability. Think about what it means that his secure systems were accessed. Think about what it means that his face revealed genuine shock. Think about what it means that the world saw his vulnerability, that is not recoverable, that psychological devastation where the foundation of power projection crumbles visibly. And here is the profound truth about security assumptions. They work until they don't, and when they fail completely. Soviet communication security seemed absolute until it wasn't. Iranian nuclear systems appeared impenetrable until they weren't. Putin's nuclear command followed the same arc, invincible, until proven otherwise. Now it has been proven, and his face told the world everything. Tonight, one thing is clear. Ukraine has penetrated Russian nuclear systems. Putin's reaction confirmed the breach's significance. The assumption of Russian invincibility is shattered. And tonight, for the first time since he took power, Putin looked genuinely afraid. The Kremlin is scrambling, frantically scrambling. And when Putin scrambles this visibly,